I guess this is just the year that I'm trying to do anniversary reviews, because this is the week that I'm putting up this video that the original RoboCop from 1987 turns 30. The anniversary was actually the Monday this week, and at first I was thinking of doing a trailer review with Christine to celebrate, but the trailer for the 1987 RoboCop fucking sucks. The movie, however, a fucking classic of the 1980s, of 1980s sci-fi, 1980s action. It almost feels like a law that everyone who considers himself a sci-fi fan has to have at least seen the original RoboCop. And in case anyone's curious, I am not going to be giving any thoughts on the 2014 remake because I didn't see it. Just wasn't interested. RoboCop is the story of a Detroit police officer named Alex Murphy who is killed in the line of duty, and this technology consumers company, the name of the company is Omni Consumer Products, aka OCP, and OCP has bailed out the city of Detroit during a financial crisis and is responsible for funding the city's police department. And the company is putting together a RoboCop, as they call it, to fight crime 24/7 and never have to take a break. And they need a volunteer, and Alex Murphy, after being killed in the line of duty, they decide to use his remains because apparently they have a way to take his years of experience on the force and transfer it into a new robotic body. You gotta suspend a lot of disbelief with this movie, but it's a great film and it works on a lot of levels. It's straight up action. There's also some pretty gut-wrenching drama at times, and the idea that Alex Murphy was killed and he lost everything, and after he becomes RoboCop he starts to regain some memories and a sense of who he was before. And there's also some pretty good comedy in here. Like, Paul Verhoeven, the director of RoboCop, is very good at making action, but also having comedy spliced in, but not to the point where you consider the movie, or you classify the movie as a comedy. But he's pretty good at having some pretty fun moments, and a lot of the time Verhoeven goes for satirical type movies, like movies that are a satire on social issues or political issues, and they carry a satirical commentary. And all in all, I'd say RoboCop really succeeds on all levels of being funny, serious, suspenseful, and just keeping you on the edge of your seat and not feeling like it's too short or too long about 80% of the time. There are a few flaws with it. I will admit, there is no film that does not have at least some, even the most perfect films, some minor flaw to it. RoboCop is pretty solid, except for a few maybe character traits with the supporting cast, and there's a common belief amongst a couple of fans that the original RoboCop ends very abruptly. Like, the film is coming to its climax, and while it is near its end, you feel like there should have been maybe a few extra scenes at the end to clarify or wrap up a few loose ends. But for the most part, it doesn't bug me, and everybody involved in the making of the film put their heart into it and did an extremely good job. Next to Paul Verhoeven, we also had Edward Neumeier, Neumeier, and Michael Miner writing the film's script. And it's a pretty solid writing, from my opinion. There are a few, as I said, moments with the characters that are a little uneven or just a little too quirky for my taste. Like, we got a scene with the villain saying that cliched line 100 times. We could have been friends. Not that that's awful, just a few cliche things, but the writing with RoboCop and the main supporting cast characters are for the most part very good, and it was just very engaging, and it's a great story, very compelling, and it flows extremely well. The movie gets to its main plot point, not right away, but about maybe half an hour in, and they paced it extremely well. And just so they don't go without credit, the movie was produced by Arnie Schmidt and co-produced by, once again, Edward Lumiere, who had actually been an executive at some big movie studio before he got into writing, like got to do his real dream. Executive producers include John Davidson, associate producers Stephen Lim, and Phil Tippett, who also did some of the special effects for RoboCop. Phil Tippett is responsible for the Ed 209 robot, a sort of pre-RoboCop robot, which turns out to be a major failure for the OCP company. Phil Tippett also has done the special effects for quite a few big blockbusters. And he won an Oscar for the special effects he did in Jurassic Park. I got a dry throat. Some other key players in the making of RoboCop who helped make it such an amazing film are Basil Polidorus, who did the incredible music score to this film. I don't know how to describe it other than it's very techno, very 80s, very techno, and it just feels epic. And the film's amazing editing is done by Frank J. Orsote. And the special makeup effects there's a lot of blood splatter in this film, and Peter Weller, after he becomes RoboCop, the makeup used to make him look like a man whose skin has been taken off his body and put onto a more powerful machine body. It is still extremely impressive to this day. Like, I look at the scenes with Peter Weller where we get to see him unmasked out of the RoboCop mask, and he really will think it's a machine with a human face on it. I'm sorry. For some reason my throat is just a dust collector today. If you see any water appear out of nowhere, it's because I probably got up and got more. But anyway, I got off track there. The fucking throat. The amazing makeup effects in RoboCop were done by Rob Bottin, who also did the fucking incredible, amazing effects in my all-time #1 favorite film ever, John Carpenter's The Thing. see if I can make any improvement here. It felt great to watch RoboCop again. I haven't seen it for a few years. I recorded it off of TV about 7 or 8 years ago, I think. On VHS, mind you. I had a working VCR back then. I still do, but can't have one that can record anymore. I love VHS. Sue me. I used to watch RoboCop relentlessly. Like, it just felt so good, and I looked to it for inspiration when I was trying to write back at that age. And not really knowing what good storytelling was, you can imagine how my writing turned out. I mean, RoboCop is great, but I had a very retarded way of writing when I was in high school. But yeah, I don't remember the last time I watched RoboCop. It's been a while. Just brings back a good feeling. To watch RoboCop, even if you have seen it already, it's exhilarating, and it's not for everybody. There's some people who might not be able to get the dark comedy side to it, and there's some who might not be able to take the violence, and I found that for certain moments I just started to get a little emotional or misty in the eyes, just because it's an epic film. And like many, I was pretty, the RoboCop series, all three, were made and released before I was even alive. But like anybody, I watched the sequels. The second one's not the worst, but it's definitely a downgrade. And the third one, we all know how everybody feels about that. I actually saw the third one first because my overprotective mother didn't want me to watch an R-rated movie when I was 13, but she went, "Oh, that one's PG-13. You can see that." I know there's been a lot of other bullshit involving RoboCop, but yeah, the first one's incredible. And in the 1980s, like, when people talk about great sci-fi action movies of the 1980s, the first movie they usually go to is The Terminator. But then there's RoboCop, and they're very different movies. I guess with RoboCop, like, the Terminator I do like the Terminator a bit more, but RoboCop, something it has over the Terminator is its main character is still part human, and also he's the good guy, but this RoboCop has a lot more heart to it, and has a more emotional journey, and the movie is a lot deeper than you would expect from a 1980s action film. RoboCop, Alex Murphy's struggle to rediscover who he was is genuinely moving to watch. And the film's supporting cast is just equally as strong as the lead character. Alex Murphy, who was killed pretty much on his first day on the job, was partnered before his death with this badass female cop named Ann Lewis, and she's played, surprising for anybody who only knows her from, say, Carrie, by Nancy Allen. And this role was really going against typecasting for Nancy Allen at the time. Like before RoboCop, she had primarily played either comedic roles, not very strong characters, or just pretty unlikable characters. Most of the time in films directed by her former husband, Brian De Palma, who, for full disclosure, I think is a great filmmaker. But here she is a fucking awesome badass cop. And what's also pretty cool is, despite being a badass, they managed to give Ann Lewis a lot of character growth. Like, she's not just a badass. Like, they made sure she was a kick-ass female character, but they also gave her a lot of three-dimensional stuff. Like, she is able to form a friendly bond with Murphy, and she breaks down when she thinks that he's died. Has a lot of good scenes where she has to emote, like go through feeling sympathy or sad, and also happiness, but then she also is able to go right on into fighting mode. Like, she was all over the place, and Nancy Allen did a fucking fantastic job here, and just further pisses me off how they completely fucked up with how they used the Lewis character in the sequels. If I ever review them, I'll go into further detail on my thoughts on that. And the only other fellow cop who I feel is worth mentioning is Sergeant Reed, played by the late Robert Doquui, D-O-Q-U-I. Reed is one of the few characters to appear in all three RoboCop films, and he's definitely one of the few highlights in the latter of ones, especially number 3. He's a strict authority figure, but he's got a heart of gold. And Robert Doquui, he had a good way of coming off as genuine, and I just like him. And then, of course, there's the people at OCP, the very fascist company that is trying to take over the city of Detroit and uses every manipulative and scheming business tactic in the book to do so. The company is run by this character who we never really know the true name of. He's simply referred to as the Old Man. He's played by Dan O'Harely, who might remember, many horror fans might remember, as Cochran in Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Here playing a kind of more sympathetic character. He's not necessarily a bad guy, but he is all about his business, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to achieve it. But he seems to have a few morals here. He's another character that got tremendously fucked over in the sequels. And it's just funny that they call him the Old Man, like that's his true title. And you wonder, does he know that that's what everybody calls him? I don't know, maybe. But yeah, he's seems like a crusty old fart who has big dreams. And the people responsible for making RoboCop are Bob Morton, played by the recently deceased Miguel Ferrer. And I think one of his earliest breakthrough roles, like it wasn't his first, but I think this is probably a role that got him a lot of attention. Bob Morton is like the struggling member of a company. If I sound weird, because I got Tic Tacs in my mouth, trying to get as much liquid to my throat. And he's like that small guy at a company that wants to make it big and doesn't want to wait 10 years to get there. And once he goes from being the little guy to the big guy, he becomes just as big a bully as the big guys who used to be ahead of him were. And even though the character is a huge freaking asshole, there's a weird charm to Miguel Ferrer, and Vera Hoven noticed this, saying that Ferrer was able to take this character that was originally meant to be 100% unlikable, and maybe not make him likable, but you kind of feel a little like you want him to succeed, but then he just becomes a real cunt when he does. Like, he is really shitty to those around him, when there really is no reason to be. Like, the OCP people are awful. They treat the cops who work for them very terribly. And in situations where it's uncalled for, like when a cop asks a question, Bob Morton's like, it's OCP business, so get lost. And they just are assholes and aggressive in certain situations where they could have easily gone over this in a polite manner. Like, I know that's not interesting to some people, but I really think this character could have worked as a more likable person if they didn't make him so succumbing to being in the big leagues and being a bully. The only friend that Bob Morton has, and apparently the only person who cares about him, is this guy named Johnson, played by Felton Perry. Johnson is also a character who appears in all three films, and his character is definitely very interesting. He evolves as the series goes on, and his character arc is the only thing that is consistent and doesn't feel like it got ruined by the third film, even though he's completely different by the third film. And last thing I will say about Bob Morton. The scene where Bob is killed, like, you can get the feeling he had it coming. And because he was being cocky with people he should have known better than to be cocky with. In fact, that's what the person who kills him says. But at the same time, when he dies, I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for him. But at the same time, I feel like he should have known better. But what is an 80s action film without some awesome bad guys? And RoboCop has a lot of bad guys. Of course, we get scenes of him taking down local street criminals. Like, his first bust is of this guy holding up a convenience store. And it's a great scene where this guy is firing a machine gun and the bullets just bounce off RoboCop. And something I really love about this convenience store shoot-up scene is just the complete middle finger it gives to physics. Like, the guy fires this gun at RoboCop, and RoboCop grabs the barrel, and bends it like it's putty, and yet somehow he doesn't fling the gun out of the guy's hand when he bends it. And when the guy tries to run, RoboCop clotheslines the guy. And here's the thing. The guy runs, RoboCop slams his arm like this into the guy as he's going this way, and the guy somehow flies through the air in the direction of the hand. I know the physics don't make sense, but I love that scene. I love just how it's like, fuck you, reality.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
The next bit we get is RoboCop saving a woman from getting raped, and it's a very inventive scene. Two guys are about to rape a woman, and when RoboCop shows up, one of them holds her with a knife to her neck. And the original script, RoboCop just shoots the rapist holding the woman in the head with a bullet flying past her face. But when they were filming, Paul Verhoeven noticed when the actor holding the actress held her up like this, how her legs were positioned. So he came up with the idea on the spot to have RoboCop shoot the bullet between the woman's legs and hit the rapist in the genitals.
He's gonna kill her. He's gonna kill her.
It's just fun and cool to watch. And then we get a scene of RoboCop saving the mayor of Detroit after a former councilman, I think, takes the mayor and his staff hostage. But those are just single scene bad guys. The main bad guys. First is the man responsible for killing Alex Murphy, Clarence Boddicker, played by, this will surprise a lot of people who watch TV in the early 2000s, Kurtwood Smith. Yep, the dad from that 70s show is the villain in RoboCop. And he's a very effective villain. In the early scene, we see like a news show. And that's the thing, throughout RoboCop, we keep cutting to these two newscasters named Jesse Perkins and Casey Wong, who throughout the film talk about what's happening in Detroit, what's going on with OCP, and we also get these fake commercials. Like there's a commercial for a board game called Nukem, and it's presented in this fake commercial by Butler Brothers. A little hokey, but I thought it was funny, and the commercials for the RoboCop films, at first glance, you'll think they're funny, but you also might think there's no way there'd ever be commercials like this. But the more you watch commercials these days, you realize the commercials for this movie really aren't that far fucking off. And Clarence Boddicker is apparently responsible, according to the media people, for killing over 31 cops. And when RoboCop goes through a list of Boddicker's crimes, we got murder, robbery, and rape. So yeah, really evil man. And Boddicker has a gang made up of some pretty fun character actors, including Ray Weiss as Leon Nash, Paul McCrane as Emil Antonowski, Jesse D. Goins as Joe P. Cox, and Calvin Jung as Steve Min. Steve Min's the least prominent of Boddicker's gang, but he does get the best fuck you scene in the movie.
Come quietly or there will be trouble.
Fuck you!
And the scene where the gang kills Murphy is, to many, one of the most intense scenes, probably the most intense scene in the film, where you really hate these evil pieces of shit for what they're doing. And you can tell the actors are all having fun playing their villain characters. And I just think it's funny. Ray Weiss, he has been in pretty much everything. Twin Peaks, Jeepers Creepers 2, How I Met Your Mother, and God's Not Dead 2. And also the animated movie Batman the Killing Joke. He was Commissioner Gordon in that film. But then it turns out there was a second main villain in the film. Character who we had already kind of seen as a villain from a business point of view, but we didn't expect him to be connected to Clarence Boddicker. Dick Jones, played by Ronnie Cox. Now before this, Ronnie Cox had only been known really for playing good guys or nice guys. He was the police captain and chief in the Beverly Hills Cop movies, first, second one. And here he plays a ruthless, diabolical businessman. And Kurtwood Smith we had always been used to seeing as an asshole, but Ronnie Cox, this was another big breaking of typecasting, and he was very effective, and he would later reteam with Verhoeven to pretty much play the same character again in Total Recall. And Dick Jones gets one of the best scenes in the film, in my opinion. I just think it works so well, showing just how villainous he is. The scene where RoboCop goes to arrest Dick Jones. Dick Jones is surprisingly cooperative. And then when RoboCop steps forward to arrest him, all of a sudden he finds himself freezing up and he can't really move. And then Dick reveals that, unknown to everybody, he put in a safeguard in the case that something ever led to Dick being like a suspect or anything, or to make sure RoboCop couldn't get him. Dick tells them there's a fourth directive, like RoboCop has 3 directives that he has to follow. They are serve the public trust, protect the innocent, and uphold the law. But unknown to everybody, Dick has put in a 4th directive. RoboCop cannot arrest or harm a officer who works with OCP. Like anybody who works at the company, he can't arrest them, or else he will shut down. And I just like Ronnie Cox's acting in the scene where he goes, "Did you think you were a normal cop? You're our product, and we can't very well have our product turning against us." The OCP people are really, really twisted fucks when you think about it. I mean, they take the mind of a dead guy and pretty much turn him into what they hope would be their own private, crime-fighting slave. And after revealing the fourth directive, RoboCop ends up fighting the original robot that Dick Jones was hoping to push, the Ed 209, and this is possibly my favorite scene in the whole film. I just like how RoboCop fights this thing that is a threat, but at the same time, RoboCop has his own strength. And it shows out the Ed 209 is extremely defective, and how Robo was clearly the better choice for the crime-fighting robot unit. And the music in the scene is just din 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 din, just makes you rock back and forth with it. And aside from the Ed 209 scene, I'd say my favorite other scenes would be pretty much the deaths of Clarence and Dick Jones. Like, they're just equally badass. Like, Clarence gets the most gruesome death, getting stabbed in the throat and having a big blob of blood splatter onto Robo. And Dick Jones, RoboCop, who records everything he sees through his eyes, shows up at OCP, and to prove that Dick Jones is corrupt, he plays a video from his perspective of Dick saying that he was responsible for killing Bob Morton. And Dick, realizing he's fucked, grabs a gun and tries to take the old man hostage. And this is an awesome, clever moment, because right before this, RoboCop told everyone that he cannot arrest an officer of the company. So when Dick is holding the old man hostage, and the old man suddenly looking like he has had a spark of thought hit him, Dick goes, "Dick, you're fired!" And then we see the words "fourth directive" disappear from RoboCop's screen, and he's like, "Thank you." And then, bang! Bang! And Dick Jones is shot so many times, he literally goes through the glass. We get a funny moment from Johnson, and then the old man says, "Nice shooting, son. What's your name?" And Robo says,
Murphy.
and that's where the film ends. And quick run through of the other villains' death scenes. Joe, the annoying, laughing, taunting black member of Clarence's gang, he is definitely the most insufferable of the group, which makes his death scene extremely underwhelming when he's simply just shot twice and goes down. I mean, with such an insufferable character you just fucking hated, you would have expected him to get, say, Emile's death scene. Emile chases RoboCop in his truck, and he crashes, missing RoboCop, into a vat of toxic waste. This is one of those settings where you think it's believable, and then not sure what's going to happen. Emile, the doors open and the toxic waste floods out, taking Emile out with it. And then we hear some type of grunts. And then Emile stands up and we see... And this is a part of the film that freaks people out to this day, anyone who's seen the movie. Emile's skin is literally dripping off his body, and like his eyelids are drooping down, and It just looks. I read that this scene is possibly inspired by, could have been inspired by the Toxic Avenger, but according to most sources, it was more likely inspired by the Incredible Melting Man, and the makeup here is just amazingly graphic. And we get this fun moment where Emil, dripping, stumbles over onto Leon, and Ray Weiss, seeing Emil's like, "Ah!" And he's like, "Don't touch me, man!" Ugh! And just runs off. And Ray Weiss's death scene, not the most brutal. He's just blown up. But it's a fun moment, and Ray Weiss says that he still has a piece of his clothing that was used for the, I guess, dummy in the explosion. So it's nice to know he had fun. I think I've said pretty much all the stuff I can say, especially with this dust collecting throat I'm having today. So, I only really have 3 other things to say right now, and I wish I could go on more, but I'll probably be able to edit it down, but my coughing has made this recording go on way too long. Just want to mention a few things. Throughout the film, next to the constant, news segments, we also see clips of people watching this comedy show with this short, bald, mustachioed, pedophile-looking comedian go, "I'd buy that for $1, usually as the punchline to some cheap sex joke. And the skits aren't really that funny, but what is funny is how all the characters who watch the show act like it's the funniest thing in the world.
I'd buy that for $1.
Something I forgot to talk about in my initial filming of this review is how RoboCop is apparently supposed to be seen as some kind of Christ figure. Director Paul Verhoeven is known for using Christian symbolism in some of his movies, and he has said that he sees RoboCop as a future version of Christ. And the scene where I think this vision could be the most obvious is when RoboCop has his showdown with Clarence Bodiger, and the way the scene is shot, where he's walking through a lightly flooded area, it almost gives the appearance that he's walking on the water. The only real opinion I have on this symbolism is that it's very subtle, and if Paul Verhoeven hadn't stated this was what he had in mind, I think most people probably wouldn't have noticed it. Verhoeven in both RoboCop and Starship Troopers, he also directed that. And that movie was also written by Edward Neumeier. Both movies feature a scene of men and women in a kind of co-ed locker/shower room, which I just think is interesting. Like in RoboCop, we get a scene of the male and female officers sharing the shower and locker rooms, changing around each other, and they act like it's the norm. Like, this is an idea I think Verhoeven might have for the future, that everybody's co-ed. Or maybe it's a sign of how Detroit is struggling. It's hard to tell, but I just thought that was interesting. They never acknowledge it, it's just there. Well, that's been my review of the original 1987 RoboCop. This week, RoboCop turned 30 years old, and I don't know how many more anniversary reviews I'm going to do this year, but I thought this was a cool one to acknowledge. See you next week.